Hello everyone, I hope you all can hear me, and if you can hear me loud and clear, please say yes in the chat box quickly, and then we'll begin our class. And trust me, this class is going to blow your mind because there are so many questions you get in your exam. Almost every single time, 2 to 3 questions you get from this section alone. Mostly, again, I tell you, all in chronological order, and sometime they'll ask to match the following and also correct the pair. Mostly, they ask these kind of questions from this session alone. So, give me a thumbs up so we can start quickly. Okay, so let me tell you what we have studied in our previous session. We started our the age of Milton, right? And there we talked about Milton and everything what they have asked in your exam. And we have made set of like his early poems, and then at the end his kind of major poem appeared, and in the middle there was all the prose works, right? And we have created a complete order for that too, and if you haven't watched the session you should go and watch quickly. So if you count in that age, the age of Milton, and also will include Donne, because we are talking about metaphysical, right? And we have already had a session on Donne in our couple of previous sessions that you will go and find. So there we have almost solved like 25 questions on Donne, and similar 25 questions on Milton, and this time again we're gonna solve around 30 questions. So total, it's alone like 55, and then we have 80 questions already from this session, a period alone. And it's very important, and it's a very significant number, as you can see, because you're definitely going to get 10 to 5 questions. So you can just think like average wise we are getting around 7 questions from these sessions that we have previously, and together if we add. So today we're going to talk about roundhead poets, Cavalier, and Metaphysical. So these are, and also we're going to talk about prose in this session also. So together we'll just complete today the age of Milton, or you can say the Caroline era or the Caroline age. Will discuss A to Z and whatever they have asked in the past. And you know there are so many questions already appeared in your exam recently as well. You can, if you just find the question paper, you will know how significant it is, this particular session. Anyway, let's begin. And we have remember all the codes to remember everything. So after this session you will never be able to forget what we have studied, what we'll study today. Everything in a good code that you will remember. So let's begin. So as you can see, Roundhead versus Cavalier. So we have code for this, right? Cavalier poet, loyal, right? Cavalier. Remember the code we have made. Loyal, Cavalier. They are actually, and we have the code that I'll show you here. Loyal, Cavalier, care well, for love's sake. This code, if you remember, then your Cavalier set of poets will be solved immediately. But before that, as you know, they were all loyal to the King Charles, right? And opposite of this, they were called Roundhead, who are basically what they are, supporter of the parliament or who, the court. And from all this we have all that, you know uh, that Caroline poetry. So basically what was happening at that time? Civil war. That's why they are all divided here. So let's begin with Roundhead. So these are called because they were the supporter of the Parliament of English England during English Civil War. Very important. They're also known as parliamentarians. So very important word that in exam if they ask something like opposite or some other word they use like roundhead or parliament, you will kind of think that both are the same, and obviously they are the same. So and they were fought against King Charles. And on the other hand, Cavaliers are who? They supported Charles and the royal family. So Cavalier claims to rule by absolute monarchy, and that monarchy actually explained here in Leviathan Hobbes that you can talk about, like absolute monarchy, social contract. These two words are very important when we talk about Hobbes Leviathan. All the time they ask question from that. Basically what they ask is the chronological order, and it includes with who? Our Brown's Religio Medici and Burn Ariel. So this work they actually align with Brown. So most of the time they ask in a this kind of combination. Anyway, as you know, Hobbes was aligned with royalist, not a true cavalier anyway, or roundhead. He was both, talking about why both are important in his work, Leviathan. And we'll anyway talk about Leviathan in our like later in the session, especially at the end of the session. So the goal of the roundhead was what? To give the parliament supreme control over our king, right? So that is very important. And from 1641, Milton gave up poetry for prose polemic for the sake of Puritan cause. So in a roundhead, like we have in Cavalier, right? Loyal Cavalier care sick lovers. So in Roundhead, we have Milton there. So Milton was in the part of that Roundheads. He was actually kind of belonged to that group. We already discussed about Milton in our previous session. So John Milton might be called a Roundhead, very important. And again, as you know, he was a staunch Republican and a vocal critic of our Charles King, right? And then we have Andrew Marvell, also because Andrew Marvell, that he was a friend of Milton, so kind of he also supported the Parliament. Then we have George Wither, another. He was also a Puritan poet and satirist, and he also belonged to the category of Roundhead. And John Bunyan, again, he was also Puritan and supported the Parliament and served in its army. So I hope Roundhead is clear, and if it is clear, you can write in the chat box quickly. Okay, let's talk about Cavalier poet. As you know, we have the code loyal Cavalier, care well for love's sake. What happens here? As you know, they are kind of school of English poets in the 17th century that supported King Charles during the English Civil War. So that's your whole Cavalier concept is here. So, who was the leader? Our Charles. We already talked about iconoclastic, if you remember. If not, then I'll tell you a little bit about iconoclastic that we have discussed. We've already discussed there, and I hope that is clear for you. Anyway, the Cavalier poet, as you know, Herrick, Lovelace, Carew, Suckling, Waller. So simple. Loyal Cavalier care well for love sake. So that sick is, kind of represent both Herrick and our Suckling. So Robert Herrick, as you know, the date you should remember because sometimes they ask in chronological order, not all the time, but in very rare case you will get it. So also we have quote to remember. Herrick Herrick whispers to the noble virgins of these two virgin, Anthea and Julia, and what he whispers, gather rosebuds and cherry. So Herrick whispered to the noble virgins Anthea and Julia, gather rosebuds and cherry. So you remember everything in order. So English cleric, as you know, he was also a poet and he is also known as the Sons of Ben Jonson. Very important. And his two volumes are Noble Numbers, Hesperides. As you know, Hesperides had 1400 poems, and what you have to remember there is to the virgin to make much of a time and gather you rosebud while you may, and to Anthea, to Julia, and cherry ripe. All of these you have to remember because in exam they ask. Usually they ask about these poems from here, but you should remember everything. Remember the code. Herrick whispered to the noble virgin Anthea and Julia, gather rosebuds and cherry, which represent everything. Herrick to our name. Whisper is simply what? We have whisper. You can just make this Hesperides as a whisper that you'll remember. The noble number, virgins. We have these virgins, and who are these two virgins? We have made to Anthea, to Julia, and what is the name? Gather rosebuds, and at the end, cherry. Cherry means cherry ripe. So all these you can remember through that. You know, he wrote elegies, satires, and love songs, and that's why he belongs to that Cavalier. But so Herrick's poetry reflect truth in human sentiment, light, worldly, and hedonistic. So themes of rural life and Cavalier poets, classical tradition, and English folklore. So Johnson and Burton were major influence on Herrick, and we have quoted all this line here that you should actually know what these kind, what kinds of poem is this. So here you can see the lines. Gather you rosebuds while you may, old time is still a flying, and the same flower that smiles today tomorrow will be dying. To glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he is getting, the sooner will his race be run, and never he's to setting. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer, but being spent the worse and the worst, and times still succeed the former. And then be not coy, but use your time, and while you may go marry for having lost, but once your prime, you may forever tarry. All these lines are important for you to remember. Then we have Thomas Carey. As you know, he also belongs to who? Our loyal Cavalier, care, love, sick. Care well, love, sick. So he also is a Cavalier poet, and we have a code: cruel reptiles means cruel, Carew, reptiles means rapture. That's what you have to remember. Again, Cavalier group of Caroline poets, and what you have to remember here, he also that Clarendon, another important prose writer in Caroline era, said what? Consider him a person of pleasant and facetious wit. He was brilliant circle of friends, and he was also called the sons of Ben. Very important. And he greatly admired the poems of John Donne, whom he called the king of the universal monarchy of wit, in his elegy Donne. Okay, and then we have Richard Lovelace. Lovelace, we have a story, love story of Althea and Lucas in the prison. So, in that code, you will remember all of Lovelace works. Also, the you should know the lifespan when he was born and the same in the year of his death. Both of these you should remember because they ask chronological order. Right, so as you know, he was a one of the Cavalier poets, and he supported king during the civil war. That's why we call him Cavalier. And best known work is To Althea from prison to Lucasta going to the war. And if you remember this code, it'll be easy for you to remember, right? So Richard Lovelace kind of completed. And remember, Lovelace also wrote The Scholar and one tragedy, The Soldier. They didn't ask much about it, but these two you have to have an idea. And again, he wrote a sonnet to Goneril Goring. To Lucasta going to the wars, you should know the date, 1640. To Althea from prison, 1642. And he wrote The Rose followed by the Scrutiny. So what we have, love story of Althea, Lucast in the prison, right? And other poems, as you can see, he also wrote animal poems similar like Ted Hugh wrote, right? Like the thought fox, hawk roasting, jaguar, crow, and otter, the hawk in the rain, and thrushes. Same like he wrote here, Lovelace, the ant, the grasshopper, the snail, the falcon, the toad, spider. Very important that you should know all of this. Anyway, so that was all about some of the important line which you find mostly in his Lucasta going to the prison and all. Nor is fit that more I should acquaint, lest men adore in one a scholar, soldier, lover, and a saint. And remember these two Althea from prison, stone walls do not make a prison, not iron bars a cage, minds innocent and quite take that for an hermitage. And the end of Lucasta going to the war is what? I could not love thee, dear, so much, loved I not honor more. Just have an idea that there is very important quotes, these two, as you know. Then we have suckling. Simple, Sir Suckle, why so pale and wan on your wedding? So if you remember this code, you will easily remember all the works that he has written, all the poems. As you know, he is also what a cavalier, supported the king. And another thing he important, yeah, kind of he invented the card game called cribbage, very important. And he has written very famous ballad upon a wedding. So we have a code, why so pale and wan. So this is the whole poem that you should remember on your wedding, means upon a wedding. So suckle represent the name. So all through this code you will be easily kind of remember suckling. So he was a gentleman, chamber of Charles I, and a friend of the poet Thomas Carew, Lovelace, and Sir William Davenant. And in 1641, Suckling took an active part in the plot to rescue all of Stafford. When the plot was discovered, what happened? He fled to France, and what he committed suicide there. Another important is the Goblin comedy, and they all contain echo of Shakespeare, Beaumont, and Fletcher. Right. And very important, song that he has written, Why So Pale and Wan, Fawn Lava. They have asked before, like 8 years ago, not recent. They didn't ask about this poem, but usually they were asking. So you can imagine, before exams were quite tough, I guess. But these times it's very easy if you know all these codes, and whatever the session we are doing, it will be more than enough. It will definitely secure you 80% above. So you should not miss a single session. Very important. Another is we have again Cavalier, Edmund Whaler. As you know, he was the supporter of King, and that's why we recognize him as a Cavalier poet. And we have Wall of Divine Rose, a code. Waller wrote what? Divine and Rose. Divine represent what? Divine poems, and Rose represent what? We have Go Lovely Rose. They didn't ask much of the questions the past 6 years, but they might ask later, because he's also important Cavalier. If they go a little bit deep, I mean, if your exam, kind of, if they make it tough, they might ask from Whaler. But for the past 6 years, the trend of giving you hard questions or difficult questions are kind of gone. The trend is easy one, but mostly in order, chronologically correct the match, and of course match the following. Right, now we'll talk about metaphysical poets. Very important. And you should know that term came where? In Samuel Johnson's, where metaphysical poets, especially in the life of Cowley. Remember that term came from the lives of poet and in the life of Cowley. Very important, all the time you get questions from that. So according to Johnson, metaphysical poets, who they were led by Donne. We already discussed in our previous session everything about Donne. We have all the codes and all these things. Anyway, this poetry, what happens? Philosophical conception, and it might based on love and religious poem. So these two categories are there in metaphysical. And one question also they asked about ontology. What does it mean? A branch of metaphysics. That question they have asked recently about ontology. So you should know this particular term. So English poet, what whose work was characterized by inventive use of conceit. So conceit is what? It a kind of extended metaphor. Okay, extended metaphor. And you should know first what is metaphor. When we compare something to something, right? But it should not have like directly link with as or like. It's in all in simile, not in metaphysics. Right? So metaphysics is what? Extended metaphor. Right? What? Our conceit. So suppose we say campus. If you just say that we are these two lovers are like campus, so that campus will be your metaphor, right? But if they say the legs of these campus, so we have just extended another one, so that is your conceit. Very important. Again, another example that I'll tell you about the conceit is a spider. If you consider, if you just compare something to spider, it will be what? Metaphor, right? But if you just little bit go down, and web, or its you know legs, or its eyes, or how it crawls, right? These will be what? We are just extending it, right? That is your conceit. Very important, that you should never forget, because in exam they ask. So that is your metaphor, conceit, right? Okay, other that we have also the code for to remember that metaphysical poet Henry Vaughan. Marvelous cow crushed the herb in Cleveland. So that V is Vaughan, land is Cleveland, Cleveland, and then we have marvelous, our marvel. Cow means cowley, crush means crusher, and then herb means Herbert. So all these you will remember. What marvelous cow crushed the herb in Cleveland. So that code you should remember. Let me tell you about the first metaphysical poet, Henry Vaughan. You can just say in Tamil, no, I guess, Thalaiva retreat. Yeah, you can just make it some kind of resort name for this or hotel name for this. Thalaiva retreat means what? Thalaiva va represent Vaughan. Thaliv means what? We have Thalia and Redivia. So Thaliva retreat is another poem. Very important is here. So if you remember this, then your Henry Vaughan is correct, and then you'll get your question correctly. Very important that you should know. So if you remember this code, you will be easily to remember one. And very important is the 10th satire. So in 1646, his poems, the 10th satire of juvenile English. Very important. Like 11 years ago, they have asked question based on that. Not now, but very, like very old questions. Like, we are just following 7 years questions, and whatever they have asked, and we just trying to figure out what is the trend and what they are going to ask in the future. So mostly, if you remember this Thalaiva retreat, then Henry Vaughan is done for you. Then we have Andrew Marvell. Very important, Andrew Marvell. We have a very good kind of, you can make a story, or you can just, remember this code. Marvel, our Andrew Marvel, picks up apple from where? From the garden after returning from where? England, on his anniversary day to meet his coy mistress, and he gives and define about the love. Then your whole Andrew Marvel is done. Right. So as you know, he's a metaphysical poet. After Donne, he's the most famous guy, right, in our literature. So Marvel, these two are very important. Donne we already discussed in our previous session, and Marvel we are discussing here. So Andrew Marvel, as you know, you should know the date 1621 1678, just 1 year before lives of poet written. He died, and born when? 1620. Just 2 years before 1623, our quarto folio, he was born. So very important that you should connect like this, then it'll be easy for you to remember. So during the Commonwealth period, he was a colleague and friend of who? John Milton. That's why we have put this guy into a roundhead category. Remember? So he was against Cavalier. So Marvel, you should know, educated from Hull Grammar School and Trinity College, Cambridge. So most of the people, they were going either in that grammar college, uh, Trinity or Cambridge, London and Oxford. These were the major universities that you should know that who studied where. So his father's death may have ended Marvel's promising academic career. So after his father's death, he didn't write much, right? And you should know, first notable poem is Upon Appleton House and the Garden. We have the thing same, Marvel picks up apple from the garden. So we have two poems here. And Appleton, these both poems are written for who? Thomas Fairfax, and especially his daughter, Fairfax daughter Mary. So you should know this too. Uh, very important because they used to ask question from that upon apple time, you know, dedicated to whom. So that was the question before. So anyway, the garden is also again romantic poem, again written for the daughter. So these are called marvel. Remember, marvel mover song. Never forget this, because one is mower, then we have bog poem, right? All these kind of terms we have, so these you should know. Then we have like country poem. So these we have already discussed it in our previous session, so that you should know all these things. So as I told you, marvels picks apple from the garden, right, when he was returning from Ireland on his anniversary, right, anniversary, on his anniversary to meet to his choir mistress, define the love. And you know, this one you might not have heard a lot about it, but recently they're asking question. If they're asking on marvel, the question will be on this particular poem. They have stopped asking from to his choir mistress, but they have started asking from the definition of love. So 3 4 times this question appeared already in your exam. So in that perspective, you should know this particular poem, and for that I'll also just give you some lines so it'll just fix in your mind. Remember the code. What marvel picks up apple from the garden while he was returning from Ireland to meet his choir mistress, and there he defines about the love. So that all your marvel is clear in one line. So let me tell you about the definition of love. My love is of birth as rare as it is for objects strange and high. It was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Magnanimous despair alone could show me so divine thing, where feeble hope could never have flown, but vainly flapped its tinselled wing. And yet I quickly might arrive where my extended soul is fixed, but fate does iron wedges drive and always crowd itself betwixt. You see, iron wedge, this is your conceit. For fate with jealousy eyes does see two perfect loves, nor lets them close. Their union would, you know, her ruin be, and her tyrannic power dispose, and therefore her decree of steel us as the distant poles have placed, through love whole world on us doth feel, not by themselves to be embraced, unless the giddy heaven fall and earth some new convulsion tear. And as to join the world should all be uh, crammed into plain sphere, and all lines or loves oblique may well themselves in every angle greet, but are so truly parallel though infinite can never meet. Therefore the love which us doth bind, very important line, but fate so inversely diverse is the conjecture of mind and opposition of the stars. Right. Now let me tell you about his masterpiece, To the Choir Mistress. They used to ask a lot of questions from to his choir mistress. They still ask in between, but mostly they're asking from the definition of love these days. But you should know everything about to his choir mistress, because again this is the famous poem and it will never go out of trend. Very important. So this poem is for you guys. Remember, only 46 line. You can also memorize these line. It's also, if you read it, it's very kind of beautiful poem. We will read in this session itself after what we discussed here. Anyway, the poem explores the conflict between love and time. Remember, the poet tells his mistress they have all the time. He'd spent hundreds of years just praising her beauty, and what she could do, she could just spend years of refusing, but he'll keep praising her beauty. Romantic advances, and he gently reminds her time is limited, mortal, and the poet urges her to embrace the love and beauty fades. The argument is ingeniously what constructed and clearly presented. The reader sees an impatient lover trying to say all these things. And he also talks about what that it's a life is a fleeting nature, you should accept my love as soon as possible, right? And the poem is, remember, iambic tetrameter, as we talked about it. Iamb means what? Unstressed, stressed, right? And it has what? Iambic tetrameter, matlab four lines we have. Remember, we already talked about these things before in the beginning of our session, not this session, but beginning of our course. And remember, the rhyme are in the couplets. What kind of couplets? The first verse, had we, is in 10 couplet long. The second is 6, and then the logical form of the poem runs, if the, but therefore. Remember, it has four iambic feet. First stanza, what happens there? Describe the love without time. There is no kind of uh, you know kind of interference of time in the first stanza. He is just talking about I love you forever and all this stuff, right? But what happened? He could spend centuries, he was saying, and quietness wouldn't discourage even. He will praise for the beauty. He can refuse me for years, but I'll keep praising your beauty for the 100 years. And second stanza, what happens? Then he talks about how the human life is very short. You should think about it, and the opportunity is less. You should accept me and all these stuff. And the last stanza, what? He urges and he kind of begs for her to accept his love, and he argues that they should love with passion. Loving fully makes the most limited time, and he talks about the time is less right now, you should do it, otherwise your beauty would fade, and all these things, right? It happens in your these days also. They talk about very about that they have all the time in the world, then they just become kind of impatient, and they kind of ask for love and all this stuff. Anyway, let me tell you the lines here. Had we but word enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. Very important two lines. We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass along the day. I mean, he's talking about days. Time doesn't matter here, right? So much time that he had. Though by the Indian Ganges side, shouldst rubies find, I by the tide of Humberwood campaign. All these lines are like most important for you, and especially in English literature. Also, love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse as much as you can refuse. I don't care, I'll just keep praising you, right? Until the conversion of Jews, my vegetable love should grow. Whatever happens, my love will only grow and grow, right? Vaster than empire and more slow. Again, 100 years should go and praise. All this again, praised, you can refuse me. Thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze. 200 years to adore each breast. All talking about years that I'll take that many years to praise your forehead gaze, your eyes, your breast. But 30,000 to the rest. Again, the age at least to every part. All the time he's talking about all these things to her, to his beloved, right? And the last age should show your heart. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love it, lower it. Again, very important. Now here, that kind of volta, that turn is coming here, right? From here, there is some turn between here. But at my back, I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. And yonder all before us lie desert of waste eternity. Remember, thy beauty shall no more be found. In the future, he's talking about. He's becoming impatient now. Now, in thy marble vault shall sound, and my echoing song then warm shall try that long preserved virginity, and your quaint honor turn into dust, and into ashes to all my lust. It will all be gone through the time. Then you should as soon as possible accept my love, right? The graves is a fine and private place. Again, he's talking about all these things, but none, I think, do their embrace. Now therefore, while your beauty is still there, sits on the sky skin like a morning dew. All he's talking about the present beauty that she possess. and while thy willing soul transpire at every pore with instant fires. Now let us sport us while we may. Again talking about abhi time hai. Right now we have enough time. We should do it right away. Otherwise, your all the beauties, whatever you possess, will be gone forever. Rather at once our time devour than languish in a slow chapped power. Let us roll our strength to all our sweetness up into the ball and tear our pleasure with a rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, thou we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. So all these things you should remember, that what happens in the poem and all these lines that I have told you. Next we have our John Cleveland, very important, not very important in fact, but you should know the character of London. So Cleveland itself represent everything, and if you just know the poet, you will know Cleve means character, land means London, and Cleveland is his name, obviously, right? So you will easily remember what he has written. So that's all you what you have to remember in Cleveland. Then we have Cowley, Abraham Cowley, very important. Owl of Thisbe, constantly referred as demigod. If you remember this code, then you will easily be, kind of remember every single work that he has written. Very important. Remember, Cowley was born in London, Westminster, again studied in Cambridge, mostly supported the king during the Civil War. After the Restoration, he lived in retirement, writing books. Cowley was an infant prodigy, and at 10 he wrote the epic Pyramus and Thisbe. Remember, we have Owl of Thisbe. Owl is Cowley, Thisbe is this work. Constantly means Constanta and Felicities. Remember that. Referred as demigod, very important. Devi means Davides, and guardian is what demigod. And as goddess we have made here, as you should know, that is the mistress. And Pindaric ode, both important. And why Cowley is very significant in your metaphysical uh, set of poet, because the life of Cowley by Dr. Johnson, he talked about metaphysical poets, especially in Cowley. Very important. Remember the date of this life of Cowley, somewhere around uh, 1778 or 9 to 81, I think. This is the time that you should know. Anyway, essay and discourses concerning Oliver Cromwell, who now reads Cowley, Alexander Pope said. So you should know all these things. Now we have George Herbert. Very simple one. Herbert alter the east wings in the temple. So there is a temple. This Herbert alter these east wing to the temple. So this code, if you remember, it will be easy for you. As you know, he's a Welsh poet and studied in Trinity College, Cambridge. None of his poem was published during his lifetime, only after his death. Remember, very important, the temple. Full title, The Temple, Sacred Poems and Private Ejaculations. And some of the poems, such as the Altar and Easter Wing, they are called pattern poems. So mostly his poems are like, if he's talking about temple, then the poem will be like this, like a temple, you know, like all these things. Pattern poem. Okay. Then if it is talking about Easter wing, then it'll be like this, then this, then this, like this wing. So these are the pattern poem usually. And John Addition said about him that it's a false wit. Right, and Coleridge also wrote about Herbert's section, nothing can be more pure, manly, and unaffected. Okay, so that is all about Herbert. And again, we have Crosha. Crosha is what? Simple code, crash on the steps of these temple while praying to our Lord. So, if you remember, then it'll be easy for you to remember all these works. Usually, remember, we have metaphysicals what in two parts. Some of them are love poem and some of them are kind of religious lyrics, so that you have to remember. So he, Herbert and Croshaw and Denham falls into that religion category, and our love category, who is there? Dunn, Marvel, Suckling, Lovelace. With the name you can understand, right? So these are also Herrick. These are there. Very important that you should know the sets of it. Then we have Sir John Denham. Simple Denham is very important only for this. They have asked one question based on that, but it was on what? In the option. They didn't ask any kind of questions from him, but in the option there was, and it was not the answer. So these kind of they appear, all these things. Thomas Trahane, very important that you should know that he talked about the centuries of meditation. Okay, now let me tell you very important thing that we're going to discuss now, 25 plus questions, and then after that we'll move. If we have enough time, then we'll talk about prose as well. The first question again about the chronologically, all the chronological order sequence of the relation to the English literary history. What came first? Obviously, it's our Cavalier first, right? Cavalier. Then what we have? The lake poets, right? Or romantic. This is romantic, like somewhere around 1798 to 1750, somewhere here. Cavalier, easy to remember, 1640 to 1660, as you know. And then we have the what, the images, that modern poet, remember, imagist, somewhere around we have 19, somewhere around 1900 to 1920, after 1920. Then we have the movement poet who's after 1950, right? So these are, you have to remember. Let's see the dates and it'll be clear. As you know, 1642 to 51, we have just made 60. That's absolutely correct. No problem. The lake poets around same. We know the Lamb, Mary Lamb, Wordsworth, all these included at this time. So it's definitely 1798 to 1850. Right. And imagism. Imagism, remember, through the war time. I told you 20, but it is before 1914 to 17. And as I told you, the movement is after 1950. Very important. So through that you can easily answer. And in movement we have all these poets that anyway we'll talk about when we discuss modern poetry. Right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to discuss again. There is another question. What here again it is about chronological sequence of the British poets and in order of their birth. And again we have Marvel, Milton, Donne, Lovelace, Carew, right? And we have all the codes there. And if you know, then you can answer. And it is for you here that you can check out the notes and answer this for you. So I didn't put any answer here, only because mostly I don't put order, because we have already discussed the codes and all that you can easily answer, right? Who composed Lucasta? Lucasta we already talked about. Remember the love story in the prison, right? Love story in the prison we talk about, right? Our Lovelace. Remember love story in the prison, all these things. Lucasta and Althea. So that is our poem. The Althea, Lucasta, love in the prison. That, so easy to answer. It's Lovelace. Other poems you can see here. We have the church, altar, sacrifice, love, redemption, the collar, poly, video, elixir, and the bag. All these notes you will get in your Google Classroom or whatever the platform that you have joined this course. Right. Then we have, again we are talking about Thomas Carew. Again it's in the option. We have already discussed. Question 4, one of the following is a set of metaphysical. We have the set of right metaphysical poet. Who are they? Cow, right? Cow, Crash, Hub, Cleaver, Land. Cleveland. We have the code for this, right? And that is your answer. We have done Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell. Only this they have given, but there are more also. Like Henry Vaughan, John Dryden. So this option is not there. T.S. Eliot definitely not. Alexander Pope definitely not. So we are left with the first one, which is your answer. Now, who among the following are two great masters of the French language that T.S. Eliot contrasts with Dryden and Milton? Why we have put here about, because it's in the metaphysical poets in this particular essay. And he talked, we already discussed this question in our previous session. John Racine and the Charles Baudelaire. Easy to answer. Question number, again we have another one. Which of the two following are Samuel Johnson's statement about metaphysical points? What he said. As we know, Life of Cowley, it was there, right? Life of Cowley, remember the date, 1779 somewhere or 81. These are the date in between. It was written and published. These two dates you have to remember. What he talked about, they were singular in thoughts. Do you think mostly love or religion? They were careful in their diction, or they affected combination of dissimilar image. So what is the question? Two of the following about poets. So our answer is A and C. They avoided occult resemblance, definitely no. They were careful in their diction. So that is a little bit confusing. That will anyway. They were singular in thought. Johnson praised the metaphysical poet for their unique original thinking, mostly what unconventional ideas, complex intellectual realm. They affected the combination of dissimilar image. Johnson recognized the metaphysical poet's skill in creating surprising and imaginative connection between seemingly unrelated image and concepts. Okay, the life of Cowley. Which two of the following criticisms were made by Samuel Johnson against a group of writers? He termed it metaphysical. What is we are talking about? The criticism were made. We are talking about criticism. They made an inappropriate combination of wit and imagination. That they made inappropriate combination of wit and imagination. Instead of writing poetry, they only wrote verses. Is that true? They neither copied nature nor life. Of course, they copied nature and life, so that could not be the answer. And then we have they never tried to be singular in their thoughts. So again, our answer is already given. So they made an inappropriate combination of wit, and instead of writing poetry, they only wrote in verses. These things is there, and as you can see, we have the whole, extract from that the life of Cowley. The metaphysical poets were men of learning, yes. To show their learning was their whole endeavor, that is true, he is supporting, but unluckily resolved to show in rhyme. Instead of writing poetry, they only wrote verses, and very often such verses as stood the trial of the finger better than the ear, for the modulation was imperfect, that they were only found to be verses by counting syllable. Very important. We have all this to support the our answer. Anyway, how does T.S. Eliot sum up the peculiar quality of Marvel's Herosian Ode? Herosian Ode is simple, that returning from the island, remember Cromwell. So that was our poem. And we have the set, as you know, Marvel picks up apple from the garden while he was returning from Ireland, that Cromwell returning Ireland, right? And what to give to who? To his on his anniversary, to give a coy mistress, and he define the love story, love. So very important. In UGC key, it is there telescoping of image and multiplied association has Roshan aid, and we have also the quote here. Marvel Horatian Ode has a unity of sensibility, a profound and delicate sensibility, which is nowhere else to be found in literature. It is quality which cannot be explained in the abstract, which is dependent upon a peculiar sensitive apprehension of life. So they are mostly asked about T.S. Eliot's very deep questions and all that you can. I have extracted. I have. It takes a lot of time to get these text from whole kind of essay. So you should really read these explanation. Again, I tell you, you can order these things in Crack NTA series book, our bestseller, already sold over 1000 copies. And again, if you want it, you can take it. We still have 200 copies left, and it's a old sale. New prices will increase the price because the quality of the content is good. And of course, if you just read all these volumes, it'll be easy for you to uh, kind of tackle the exam. Anyway, question number 9 is on your screen. We are talking about two poems are linked with each other. Appletown to Lord Fairfax and the Penhurst. Both are country poems, right? We have here. Also, you can just find the explanation when you do the quizzes from the Google Classroom or whatever the platform as you may. You will get all these explanations, and this explanation you can find not only in the quiz or in the course, also in your Crack NTN at UGC book. Anyway, question number again, Lucasta, we all talk about, right? We have our Lovelace. Remember the code love story of Althea and Lucasta in the prison. Remember this code? Then you will easily answer that it is Lovelace, right? See, through the code, most of the question you can easily solve. You don't have to go and read a lot of stuff, right? Which of the following was not recognized as a major dialogue of Plato? So, not recognized. So, he talked about Crito, Phaedro, Symposium, but not in metaphysics. Question number 12, we have my love is of a birth as rare as it is of an object, stretch and height was forgotten, despair upon impossibility. We already talked about, read the whole text of that definition of love. So our answer is the definition of love. Easy to answer if you know the lines, any of this. Question number 13 is on your screen. If you know the answer, you can just quickly, what you can do, you can just quickly write in the chat box if you know what is the chronological order. We have already made the code. Our first criticism was about the apology of poetry, right? Then what we have, the art of rhetoric. The rhetoric is by who? Our Horace, I guess. Where is it? The art of logic and the art of rhetoric is by Wilson, and the Ars Poetica is by Horace, which is much earlier. But here is Wilson, the art of rhetoric. Then Samuel, our Philip Sidney. Then Preface to Lyrical Ballad, an essay in criticism, and what is that? The metaphysical poet. So obviously the last one would be the metaphysical poet by T.S. Eliot. So where is the E in the end? So these two is gone. We are left with two. And as we know, the first one is who? Lyrical ballads in the beginning cannot be. So this option is obviously gone. We have left with one. Easy to answer. That's how you answer the question in your exam. Anyway, Thomas Wilson wrote what? The Art of Rhetoric, 1553. We already talked when we were talking about who? The Elizabethan era. Sir Philip Sidney, remember, wrote what? The Defense of Poesy. We talked about everything on Philip Sidney. And an essay on criticism, very important, by Alexander Pope. That is all written in where? In rhyme form. Remember rhyme form, everything. And anyway, we're going to discuss in next session. We are coming out there. We're coming to our the age of Dryden and Pope. So we'll discuss there. The preface of lyrical ballads, Romantic era, 1800. This is the second, remember that, second edition. This was published in the second edition, that preface. First edition only there was poem, nothing else. So preface was added in 1800 edition. Right. Metaphysical by T.S. Eliot, somewhere around his career, as you know, we have 1992, 1931. So all his career is. We will talk about the codes and all his order. That will be easy for you to remember. Anyway, question number 14 is in your screen. You can just see here. We have the list of the poet, then the list of the poem. As you know, Andrew Malvar wrote what? We know apple from the garden. This is your answer. Andrew Marvel, easy, right? Herbert, we have Herbert. John Donne, we know valediction of poetry, easy to answer. And Herbert is the retreat, remember what we have. And no, this one, remember that. This Thalaiva retreat we talked about, right? Thalaiva retreat, your resort, so that you have. Herbert is the caller, is the poem. So easy to answer if you know the code. You don't have to even look at all these stuff and filter all these, right? If you know the code, easy to answer. Anyway, uh, that's all. Question number 15 is here. We're talking about his koi mistress. They have asked question on koi mistress. Two rivers. We know he talked about Humber and Ganges. Easy to answer. Done. Right. We have read the whole thing. These lines I have also given. Thou by the Indian Ganges side shouldst rubies find. I by the tide of Humber would complain. Easy to answer, right? Not very difficult question. If you have attended the session that I already, we had taken, then these questions are like walk in the cake, right? Very easy, very kind of. You'll feel confident when you solve these by your own. I mean, there is quizzes that you can go do, and then it will all fix. Then you can easily bag 5 questions from this 5 to 7, right? Including Milton, Donne, and this metaphysical, Cavalier, and prose. You will be easily kind of get 7 questions correct. From Shakespeare, 3 questions. Remember, we have discussed everything. You will never forget if you have attended the session. Anyway, next question, we are talking about anniversary again. Apple from the garden, right? For returning from Ireland for his what anniversary? Remember, that is our Marvel anniversary. Marvel, easy to remember. Temple is what we have a code for this, right? That Herbert kind of in the temple, remember all these things. Then Pindoric Ode we're talking about, because it was already mentioned in where the life of Cowley also. So Pindoric Ode is there, like D1 is there. The temple we already know, that's Herbert. And then John Donne, the rehearsal spot, easy to answer, right? You don't have to much kind of put effort. You can solve it in within 10 to 15 seconds. You don't even know need 15 or 30 to 1 minutes, right? 1 or 2 minutes. You can easily solve in 10 seconds if you know all the codes. Anyway, question number 18 is on your screen. We are talking about the chronological order. Life of Cowley, you know the date, 1779 or 81. Then we have preface to lyrical ballad. We know the date, 1798. Then we have what? The defense of rhyme. Remember Samuel Daniel replied to a rhymer. Remember all this. So the defense of rhyme, I guess it is the Samuel Daniel. Let's see. PB Shelley, the defense of rhyme is not by say Shelley, defense of poesy is by Shelley poesy. So this is correct, incorrect here. I'll anyway correct it and send it to you. Anyway, so you know that we have the answer. The first, rhyme somewhere around 15 before Philip Sidney's work, that somewhere around 94, you can just put 90. Then you can put our what life of Cowley 17. Then you can put what your ballad 98. So through that you can easily answer B. First B, then we have C, then we have preface, right, A, and then at the end the frontier of criticism, which is by who? Our Matthew Arnold, who also wrote what the study of poetry, the culture anarchy, all this stuff, right? We'll anyway talk about when we reach to that session. Remember, Discordia Concord, phrase by Johnson in Life of Cowley. We already talked in this session itself, very important, that here is the quote. But wit abstracted from affects. What is the question actually? A phrase used by Johnson implies what? Implies here Discordia, a combination of dissimilar image. So we have combination of dissimilar image. What happened to my pen? What happened to my pen? Sorry, it's not responding because we have already 700 pages in that slide. Yes, it's working now. Good. Nice. Anyway, dissimilar image. So there should be D in the option. So we have D, and then we are talking about next is a combination of contradictory ideas and concepts. So that is also there. So easy to answer. You can just read that from extract from the Life of Cowley that I have read and put it here. Anyway, question number 20 is on your screen. Arrange the following poets in accordance with their birth. Again, I left it for you. You have to go and use that code, right? The oldest is who? Remember, oldest, youngest, our Spencer, Sydney. Remember? Then we have our Dunn, then Hub, and at the end is our Oliver Goldsmith. So where is he? Only in two option. Two you can just remove. One, and our oldest is Spencer, as you know, be easy to answer. Remember that code that we have made. What was the code? GLC MSM, all these codes. Anyway, question number 21, we are talking about chronological sequence of these poems. So the caller, this is 39, so date is already given. You just, and seeing things is the latest one. We have the oldest here, who, what, Paradise Lost or the caller. In both of these there will be, so either B or D you can say. So B, caller, is the first. Then we have Paradise Lost. You know the date Paradise Lost, right? 1667. Then we have 71, our Regained, right? And Samson Agnostic, all these. So Lost is 67. So we have the answer here. Easy to answer. Seeing Things is by who? Our most famous Seamus. Most of the question you are getting from Seeing Things these days. Anyway, we'll talk about it when we reach to that session. Prose writer. Now it's time for us to talk about prose writer. In that, what is the time, how long we have the session? We can just do it tomorrow if possible. Otherwise, We have already discussed 1 hour 19 minutes. Already it's over, but how long it'll take if we try to cover this? Oh, quickly. Not too much of it. Okay, we can just finish it off and we'll start tomorrow our restoration. Anyway, prose writer, what you have to know the date of this guy, all 1682. Then we have who next? Hobbes. Both of these dates you have to remember. You can create a code. bro. Then we have Hobbes. Where is Hobbes? Remember the date 1588. So obviously before Brown. So Hob row. You can make like that. Or how are you, bro? Right? How are you, bro? This code, then these two should come. How, bro? Okay, very important because you are getting question from that. There is no doubt about it. Right. So now let me tell you about the Brown. What you have to know. Dr. Brown Burn Religio Medici. This code you remember, then easy to remember all these. Remember, Religio Medici he wrote, Brown burn, matlab urn burial, doctor means Religio Medici. He was a kind of. So we have all this. Remember, he also wrote Thomas Brown, The Anatomy of Melancholy. Same name we know. We have what? Robert Burton then on Anatomy of Melancholy. Both have written that. They have asked about this thing and they have asked about these things. So don't there should not be any confusion. If they are particularly mentioned some date, then you should know that. Anyway, so Religio Medici, you should know that the religion of a doctor, Christian value, faith, and hope. And remember, at that time, all the prose were somewhere related to church, or we have Bible and all these testaments. Remember testaments because Puritan were there, Protestant, Catholic, all these things, and then the Civil War. All these things were happening at that time. So if you remember all these events, then the prose would automatically will be about all these things. So we have Religio Medici. You have to remember the date as well. We have some phrase about urn burial that we have. Thomas Fuller. Fuller means full of holy war and Church of England. Again, Church, England, all these. So remember, Fuller. They didn't ask much of the question, but you should know the code. Full of holy war of Church of England. He was a clergyman, very famous for holy war and the Church of History of Britain. Good thoughts, bad times, and worthies of England. Very important. That's why we have England here. Then we have Jeremy Taylor. Remember the code Tale of Lolly Holly. Okay. Tale of Holly living and Holly dying. Tale represent Tyler. Holly living, Holly dying is his work. These two you have to remember. Then your Tyler is done. Again, all about Holly things and all the prose. Isaac Walton is important because they have asked question, and especially they have asked question on this, and they have also asked question on this. These two. So these two is are very important that you should know. Remember, he's a biographer, and he wrote the complete angular or the contemplative man's recreation. It's a pastoral discourse on joy of what stratagems and fishing. Remember about the fishing. And he also wrote biographies, including John Donne. Others are here, The Life and Death of Dr. Donne, that is your biography, and The Life of Sir Henry Wotton, Richard Hooker, George Herbert. Thomas Hobbes, very important. Hobbes, remember, how are you, bro? How are you, bro? Right? So that bro is Brown. How is your Hobbes? Remember this in chronological order. So this code is. So Thomas Hobbes, 1588, 1679. Remember, Leviathan. He is remembered for the Leviathan. And remember these words, very important when I talk about Hobbes. These uh, biblical Leviathan, you should know this by heart: the social contract and absolute sovereign. So sovereign. If you remember these two words, then your Leviathan is done. And they ask question from that also. And the date also, 1651. Can you tell me when Utopia were written? Write in the chat box Utopia date if you know. And Religio Medici date. And what we have uh, anyway, other works: Religio Medici, Utopia, then we have Leviathan, very important. Then we have a couple of more that we'll talk about. Anyway, Edward Hyde, Earl of Clarendon, studied law, you should know, and the history of the Great Reveal. Not much of the things to remember, but you should know he talked about who our Abraham Cowley, if I may recall, right? Anyway, now it's time for the question. Again, chronological order: Brown, Anatomy of Melancholy. Remember Brown, Hebrew. Then we have Leviathan. Remember our Leviathan. And then what? Walter Pater's 18th century. Kurtz 1516. Good. Vasu has answered. And P.B. Shelley, Defense of Poesy at the end. And Matthew Arnold's, of course, Victorian time, obviously after. Oh, romantic. So our answer should be either these, both of these should be somewhere near to each other. Where is the option? We can see B and C anywhere. We have B also and C also here. And as you know, Brown came later. So we have our Thomas A. Brown, first, Anatomy of Melancholy, Leviathan, B and C, and the rest. Where is B, C together? If this, you can easily answer. Date, let me tell you: Brown 1621, Leviathan 1651. These two, remember, the work is very important. But other work that you should consider is Religio Medici. What is the date of Religio Medici? Let me see. Date is not mentioned here. Anyway, let's talk about next question. Again, who wrote the popular instruction for fishermen titled The Compare? There are two questions they have asked on that. Remember that. So, Isaac Walton, right? And Isaac Walton, the same guy who wrote biography on Donne, and he talked about Vaughan, and he also wrote about Hooker, Richard Hooker, all this, right? Okay, which according to Thomas Hobbes is the only science God has bestowed on mankind that informs the structure of his monument work? What? Leviathan. So it was geometry. Another important question, little deep, that they are asking from Thomas Hobbes: Leviathan. We already talked about one word, social contract, right? And absolute monarchy. Also know the date, 1651. And what else you know? Geometry. And there he talked about who? Kepler and Galileo. Another important things that you should know. Anyway, arrange the following in the chronological order of their. Very easy to answer if you know. Simple. Leviathan. Where is B? The first one option. B we have 2. And past and present is our by Thomas Carlyle somewhere around 1843. So as you know, we have the first one, Leviathan, 1651. Then we have unto this last, past and present again by Carlyle, and the life of. So we have B and unto this last, B, past and present. So here is the date here, guys. 1651, as you know, Leviathan. The life of Samuel Johnson, remember, 1791. In his important life, Johnson, we are going to anyway discuss about Johnson. Some dates that you should know: 1755, 1778, 1781, and 1791. All these dates that you have to remember on Johnson, right? And then we'll talk about another, again, chronological order. Boswell, as you know, the date 1791. Hobbes' Leviathan, 1651. Then Pepys' Diary, we anyway talked about in Restoration times, or somewhere around 1660. So 1651, 1660, just for your idea. And then we have Pilgrim's Progress. I think we talked about, again, it's on Restoration time, somewhere around 1660. So these two are there. And Locke's Human, again at that time itself, so maybe later 17 somewhere, right? So we have all the dates here. Which should be first? Leviathan should be first, B should be first. Where is that answer? Easy to answer even if you know one of these. Question number 27, Thomas Hobbes philosophical was published in 51. Easy to answer, right? Okay, that's all, guys. We have discussed complete what? Caroline era, age or literature. We also talked about John Milton. We talked about Donne. We talked about metaphysics, physical poets. We also talked about Cavalier poets. We also talked about metaphysical Cavalier roundheads. We also talked about prose. So, and also it is called the age of Milton. To all together, you are going to get 7 questions. So that's a lot of stuff, lot of things that you don't get anywhere else, only here. So to support me, what you have to do: like the video, leave the comment, share, subscribe, join our Telegram, right? And then WhatsApp also, if you can do. And what else you can do? You can buy notes, join course, do our quiz, and all these things. Thank you so much and have a great day ahead, and I'll see you tomorrow. With tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I'll share the schedule with you, and that'll be our restoration. Very important. 2 questions you can expect, sometime 3 questions too, right? Bye bye, and thank you so much, and have a good day.